Have you ever heard of the term vaginal steaming? Well, today I want to share with you one of my closest friends. Her name is Adrienne. She is a Peri steam hydrotherapist. Maybe you've heard it on social media and you've Googled it and looked it up, or maybe you don't know anything about this. Well, today you're going to learn all about this ancient medicine that's been used for thousands of years. So if you've been struggling with gynecological issues, maybe BV or endometriosis, heavy periods, painful periods, this video you don't want to miss. Peri-steam hydrotherapy is going wild in the United States and even in places around the world. And I recommend that you pay close attention because you'd be surprised that you could be doing peri-steam in your own home with some of the things that you already have. So without further ado, let's jump into the topic about vaginal steaming.
Hello, everybody. My name is Adrienne Irizarry, and I'm a certified Peri steam hydrotherapist. My company is called Moon Essence, and I practice out of the Healing Arts Collective in Dover, New Hampshire. I am so honored to be here and share this information with you. I just want to say thank you to Antonika for inviting me to give this presentation and share with you a little bit about the ancient practice of steaming. Because you guys are such an amazingly well-read group of beautiful professionals, I'm sure that some of you have some familiarity with steaming and the practice of steaming. There is a wet tradition and a dry tradition. The dry tradition is actually smoking herbs. It can be like toilet bowl moxa, where you can put herbs together and you can sit over them for extreme cold conditions in the uterus. And I can do that, although I don't think my suite mates would be terribly excited if I did that regularly in the office. So my focus of my practice is actually the wet fumation tradition, or vaginal steaming. So it's become most commonly known as vaginal steaming, but I also will interchangeably use pelvic steaming. Some people will use the Sanskrit word yoni, yoni steaming for this particular practice. I work from an Eastern medicine perspective, so it's all about reestablishing harmony in the body. And I use steam and Chinese dietetics as the mediums with which I restore that harmony. So I'm going to share my screen here. And we are going to talk a little bit about, so what is steaming? There we go. Okay, so what is vaginal steaming or pelvic steaming? I am finding that pelvic steaming is actually a more appropriate way of talking about it, because there are far-reaching benefits much beyond just the vaginal canal. Steaming affects the entire pelvic floor, which is really great for postpartum recovery, helping any stitches, tearing, anything like that, to expedite healing and increase circulation to speed healing. But people who struggle with constipation often will also see relief from their symptoms, or an improvement in their symptoms with pelvic steaming, which is why I like to use pelvic steaming primarily in the way that I talk about it. Men and women both can use steaming for anal fissures, anal fistulas, hemorrhoids. It has shown some really great results in men for erectile dysfunction, erection quality, men who have enlarged prostates. It helps with relief from that gotta go feeling. So really, even though probably the most publicized word that is used to describe the practice as vaginal steaming, there really are far-reaching pelvic benefits. So what is this practice exactly? It's the process of sitting on a stool over a steaming herbal blend tailored for your body's needs for anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, and sometimes longer in very specific cases. So you're going to be using 10 minutes for somebody that is experiencing damp, heat, or has any type of sensitivities. So if their cycle tends to be shorter than 27 days, there's a very specific herbal blend that you would use in that instance, but you also wouldn't put a lot of heat because you don't want to overtax the body. 30 minutes is really great for somebody who is seeing a lot of blood and chi stagnation, and you really are looking to kind of get things moving, or if they have dampness and stagnation kind of together, it works very well in that application as well. Again, some of it is the medium itself, because highly energized water helps to speed the circulation, which will help with dampness, but the herbal properties can also help dry and drain dampness. So there are a lot of ways that this can be used. And yes, it really is that simple. So in our Western culture, gynecological care is very invasive. So a lot of times when I tell people what I do, they have this picture in their mind of some archaic steam tool that gets stuck into their business, and your feet are in stirrups, and that it's a very invasive process. And it's not. It is really as simple, like you see in the picture here. A setup like this would be a mild heat setup. An advanced heat setup would either have a burner under the pan, or I am a big fan of using a crock pot, because I feel like I can control the heat more consistently that way. But this is really as simple as it gets, sitting over a pot, and depending on what it is that we're treating, moving the body to direct the steam to the appropriate location. So if we're working on menstrual difficulty, if we're working on postpartum recovery, if we're working on people who are experiencing any sort of infections or UTIs or anything like that, obviously you'd sit predominantly centered over the hole in steam. Whereas if we're dealing with anything to do with the rectum, you're going to slide forward on the seat, so that the steam can be directed at the rectum. So my process, when I work with people, the consult's the longest part of the process. I go through a comprehensive patient history and figure out what they have for imbalances that are going on. I screen for 7, one of them being actually looking at weak digestive fire, because if their body can't pull apart the building blocks and utilize the nutrients appropriately, often it's one of the dominoes that starts everything falling over. But we will talk about their lifestyle. We will talk about what they're eating. We'll talk about how they're sleeping. We'll talk a lot about period care. I talk a lot with my clients about dressing for wind, and dressing against the wind, because not only does it help the efficacy of the period itself, but it helps also prevent any illness that you're more susceptible to having creep in during that time anyway. And then I also will do their first steam session with them if I'm seeing them in person. Now, I'm one of a half a dozen. I actually think the last time I checked, there was only 6 of us that are fully certified Peri steam hydrotherapists. There are more coming up through, but when you see me in person, I will do the first steam session with somebody while they're in the office. But because there are so few of us certified practitioners at this stage, I actually see people all over the world, in every time zone imaginable. And so what I will do in those instances is get them set up with a sauna and the herbs that they need. And then I get back onto Zoom or another teleconference with them and help them and talk them through getting their own first session set up. And that's all part of my initial intake process, so that they're set up for success right from the beginning. And then, from there, we deal with acute stuff right off the bat. So if they're experiencing menstrual difficulties, if they're coming to me for infertility challenges, if they're coming to me because they're having a really rough transition, menopause, through menopause, we'll deal with whatever the acute situation was that brought them into the office. But then I coach them through maintenance, because, just because we dealt with it doesn't mean that it's a one and done type of situation. In order to be able to maintain that harmony, this is just like receiving regular acupuncture care, for example. So we talk about how you can use steam for the maintenance of the results that you've had. So, when you have menstrual issues, steaming right after your period ends and then right before your period starts, there's a very specific timing with that, will help maintain the results that they've worked so hard to achieve. If you're trying to conceive, I can switch the steaming schedule in the first part of the month in order to enhance conception abilities and support those chances. Postpartum is one of the most universally used applications for steaming, and in postpartum it's used to, like I mentioned before, minimize trauma to the pelvic floor, because I can actually start doing labor prep with people at a certain point during pregnancy. But then after the baby is delivered, I can start steaming as early as 4 days postpartum with a vaginal delivery, or 6 weeks postpartum if they've had a cesarean. Not because there's any contraindication, but simply because the incision will ache a little bit, or there's been reports of it. So I tend to wait until after they get through that 6-week follow-up after their cesarean. But it will help with the recovery after baby. You have a really beautiful opportunity to put blood tonics back into the body, steaming this way, and it doesn't end up being deteriorated by any inefficiencies in the digestive system. It goes straight to the bloodstream. And when you are steaming, you end up with upwards of 72 hours, 48 to 72 hours is what I typically tell people, of benefit from each steam session. So when they're steaming every single day in that first 30 days after they've had their baby, they're introducing a lot of these properties and consistently keeping those levels high through their recovery process, which expedites healing, minimizes the risk of infection. There's a whole bunch of benefits using it for postpartum care. Using it for menopause and the transition into postmenopause. It helps pelvic floor integrity and preventing a range of prolapse. I use some very emollient herbs with my menopausal and postmenopausal clients. If they steam before bed, it helps with insomnia symptoms. It helps them with their own natural lubrication. It helps taking down that internal heat that tends to show up as hot flashes, night sweats, personal dryness, and makes the transition through that phase of life be a lot more comfortable. I've also had a lot of success with infections. I can use it for UTIs, yeast infections, HPV, cervical dysplasia, to deal with abnormal cells. So I, with a couple of my clients, they've had HPV for years, and they've been, regularly going for colposcopies and LEEP procedures and, regular PAP follow-ups and things like that. And, have always had abnormal cells for like a period of time. And then they start working for me and they get their first regular no abnormal cell PAPs coming back. So this has incredible benefit for people that tend to be prone to having different types of infections. So how does steaming work and why is it so effective? Steam softens any of the brown, right? So when women are getting brown blood in their periods, some women, it still surprises me, even though I've been doing this for a while, when women go, yeah, so my whole period is brown. It's like, oh, wow, yep, we've got some work to do. So it helps soften and get rid of what is no longer serving the body, and help the body to rid itself of this brown blood, black blood, the sticky menses when you have a lot of dampness, and that mucousy, phlegmy quality to the blood. It helps with pelvic floor integrity. It helps facilitate a really effective uterine cleanse. So steaming in other applications, I did touch on this a little bit, but pre-menarche and menarche, it's really important. I'm still brainstorming how I want to be able to be more effective in this community, but it is a really beautiful practice for girls who are just starting their periods or just before their periods start to do once a month steaming, because not only is it great for hygiene, but it gives you an opportunity to do body literacy awareness with girls, because there are so many women who their first experience other than going to the bathroom with that part of their body is when the blood starts, and it can be a really traumatic experience for some girls, especially if they've had absolutely no warning that this could be coming at all. And it helps prevent the incident of imbalance right from the very, very beginning. So, girls that are starting their periods between 9 and 11, it's too early. Girls that are starting older than 14, they're already starting with signs of stagnation. And so this way, you're giving them the best parameters in order for their periods to start on time, but also have a positive level of awareness of that part of their body and sensation in their body prior to their periods starting. I'm really big on trying to change the narrative of, our periods aren't shameful. There's nothing gross or to feel guilty or ashamed about when you have your period. It's a very natural part of being a woman. And that's a narrative that, used to be very much a part of our culture and has very much changed over time. And, it'd be really beautiful if we could get back to that point. So that's something that I'm trying to affect some change. But it's not just for periods. It's wonderful for women who are in their middle years. And I do work with people, like I had mentioned before, with labor prep. So labor prep is great. We start right around 36 weeks, and really they don't start steaming until week 38 or 39 of their pregnancy. But what we start with at week 36 is an orientation to how this is going to help them for labor, in kind of assessing where they're at. Like, are they experiencing a lot of stagnation and dryness because baby's taking up a lot of space in their abdomen? So, maybe they need to include some more hydrating foods into their diet. Maybe they need to be making sure they move a little bit more because they're tired and everything is just really stagnant and they don't feel like moving, but it's not helping their circulation. So we kind of get a baseline of where they were at. We talk about what their cycle was like prior to conception, because not all of my labor prep clients I had the opportunity to work with prior to them getting pregnant, but their period history will give me an idea of whether I can start steaming them on week 38 or week 39. But it helps for relaxation. It helps the quality of sleep. It helps your body meet the 3 parameters that it needs in order to be able to go into labor successfully. And it helps encourage the baby to come, close to their due date in a safe and effective way. I do have people who will come to me like kind of in a panic because their doctor is talking about inducing them. And so, they're like really late in the game. We don't have as much prep time ahead of time, but I can start steaming them in that situation so that they don't have to maybe necessarily go through a hospital induction, which can induce, all kinds of things. but I have a lot of success as long as I have, like 3 to 4 days that I can, and they're committed to steaming and the circulation increasing tasks that I give them to do. We have a lot of success with them being able to go into labor naturally. I have a colleague in the Czech Republic who is actually bringing it into the hospital setting, and she is helping teach people over there how they can use steaming for stalled out labors, which is really beautiful. She's had amazing success with, women who go into the hospital, they're laboring, their labor starts to stall out. She'll sit them in a steam session for 30 minutes, and then within 45 minutes, the baby is there. So there's a lot of really practical and really beautiful application for this practice. And, again, not just labor and delivery, not just trying to get pregnant, but it's beautiful for postpartum recovery. And I did touch on this a little bit earlier. There was a pilot study done. It's called the fourth trimester study. And if anybody's interested, please send me a message and I'll send you the link. But it was a pilot study that was done here in the US. There are studies done in other countries, but the pilot study here in the US looked at using steam for postpartum recovery and how much more quickly uteruses were returning to normal size and organs returning to normal position, and the decrease in lochia and all of these things. So it was really, really beneficial to speed healing. And in the United States, we have this practice of being like, 6 to 8 weeks, women are cleared to go back to work. And most of the time, women's bodies aren't ready to go back to work in that period of time. But this study found that the women who did use steaming were probably the most well-resourced to be able to go back to work in that time frame, which was really great. So yes, this is what I do. I work with women in all phases of life using herbs, steam, and food therapy to help restore harmony in their bodies. I do refer out for acupuncture when conditions are, deeper, and we've gone beyond just a deficiency into a more extreme situation. I do refer out for acupuncture support as well, and herbal support. But there are an awful lot of things that can be very supportive to an existing acupuncture practice for a whole host of gynecologically related issues. So I hope this was beneficial and helpful for you. And I love questions and I welcome questions. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about what I do, or if you're interested in maybe collaborating in some way, and I offer services to clients that you're already seeing to be able to, just further support the work that you're doing with them. I love relationships like that. So thank you so much for your time and for listening to my presentation. Thank you so much, Antonika, for this opportunity. You are a beautiful soul, and I love what you're doing with the circle. And I hope to have an opportunity to connect with some of you and learn from you as well. Have a great day, everybody.